to a committed lot of people like you. I just feel that, I just want to share 30 years of my working with Palestinians. I'm very different from you all. I come from a country called Singapore, and Singapore has always supported Israel. That's true, okay? So I grew up like that, and then I came to London, and that time I was already qualified as a doctor. I was training in St. Thomas's. I got my FRCS, and of course, being a Christian, that also helped to grow up to be very pro-Israel, because in the Old Testament, Israel is surrounded by hostile people, and that. And then somewhere along the line, I got into trouble. My thought process, equating the Israelites in the Old Testament with the modern secular state of Israel, and at the same time, equating the Arab countries as the Philistines and the enemy of Israel. Now that is a very dangerous mindset, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's how I grew up. So now you know that this is the book I wrote called From Beirut to Jerusalem, and that's a right button or left button. Oh, I see it is. Okay, fine. So in 1982, I got my FRCS. I was training as a surgeon in St. Thomas's. How many of you are born by 1982? Okay, that's my colleague Nanu. Okay? She's another consultant, and she's come to listen. So I'm twice Nanu's age. I'm 3 times your age. Okay, so none of you are born. So 1982, I went home and I switched on the television and I saw bombs dropping on a country called Lebanon. And of course, I have no idea where Lebanon is, somewhere in the world. But I do know who are the people dropping the bombs. Israeli airmen. And that really freaked me out. And I just cannot believe that Israel is doing that. And it went reduced to this heap of rubble, bearing 200 people in it. When I saw that, I know they don't need a doctor. The bodies cannot even be recovered. It was a humbling thought. Because sometimes, you see, when you go into an area, not everybody is like Brother Amy, very, very humble. A lot of us go, I'm going to do mission. I'm going to help people. I'm going to save life. When I saw this, I know that put me in my place. And the coastline of Beirut City, if you go to visit Beirut today, you see that this is all reconstructed. Used to be a very sophisticated area, full of restaurants and a lot of nightlife and so on, all shelled by Israeli gunboats, reduced to rubble. After 10 weeks of constant bombardment, siege and starvation, Israel managed to get a group called the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, to evacuate. And in 1982, the PLO was considered terrorists. In other words, they were the Hamas of today, they were the Hezbollah of today, and they were the Free Syrian of today. So, the West has got a way of defining what is a terrorist. So, finally, the PLO evacuated. On the first day of evacuation, I got up in the morning as I was preparing to cross the campus to go to the field hospital. I saw these big red posters put up everywhere, and it said, "We love you, Beirut. Goodbye, good luck." And then I began to wonder, who are these people who are evacuating? The terrorists going, saying goodbye to Beirut, loving Beirut, doesn't fit. And then you begin to realize that these were human beings. They're able-bodied young men, a few young women, who grew up in Lebanon and were members of the PLO, leaving behind vulnerable families, elderly parents, wives, and children, with the undertaking that they will never ever return to the place of their birth, which is not Palestine, but the refugee camps of Lebanon. So that was my introduction, and I began to ask questions. So it's no longer black and white. And with the evacuation, peace came back to Beirut. The bombs stopped. And I was seconded to join this group. I think I've got it upside down. You read Arabic, so I think it's maybe, I'm scanning the picture the other way around. But basically it says that I'm a member of whatever it is. I think this is a Palestine Red Crescent Society. Now remember, I was a Judeo-Christian, and I joined the Palestine Red Crescent Society. You're talking about crossing the divide. So, but of course at that time I didn't realize that was what I was doing. So I crossed from a fundamentalist Christian background to a liberal Christian background, which is Christian Aid. And from there I crossed into Palestine and into a Red Crescent. Fantastic. And it took me to a hospital called Gaza Hospital. Okay, this is Gaza Hospital of 1982. It was a hospital protected by the International Red Cross. And that time I realized that the Red Crescent built up 9 hospitals, 13 clinics, and every one of them were targeted and bombed, including Gaza Hospital. The reason why it was not flattened, I'll tell you later on. And from the top of Gaza Hospital, you can see Sabra Shatila. Now this was Sabra Shatila in 1982. With a ceasefire, a lot of families came back to live in buildings that were destroyed. And I can believe that if the Syrian situation is sorted out, many of the refugees will also go back to a situation where their homes were destroyed, there's no walls, they bring their people back and they have to rebuild. And the Palestinians were rebuilding. And they were refurbishing, they brought along young children, and they've lost their husbands, they've lost their fathers and so on, but they're rebuilding. And the generosity which I felt from Palestinian refugees, amazing. I've never found human beings like that. What they have suffered have never made them bitter or angry. In the evening, when I finish operating, I will go down and sit in their rooms. These refugee homes are very small, and most of them have broken windows, no doors because of the bombardment. And the women would make me coffee, and then they would tell me of the story about Palestine, where their fathers or their mothers grew up. The Palestine which they will never see. And they were part of the 750,000 Palestinian refugees which were made to leave British Palestine when the state of Israel was formed in 1948. Now that was never in my history book. So I took a large map of the Middle East and I asked them, where is Palestine? And they pointed their finger at Israel. I said, Israel is Palestine. So very naive, very stupid. But then the story began to unfold, and I began to learn firsthand from these people the injustice done to them for all these years. 1948, can you imagine, 64 years ago, and they have lived as refugees, probably in tents, like the Syrian refugees. They were running away from the Israelis, which came in to massacre them, and they ran to safety in Lebanon. They put up in tents, hoping that within a year or two, they can return to their ancestral home. Never happened. And then they grew up, they gave birth to children, the tents were destroyed by the refugees themselves, homes were built, and they lived in anticipation of the day when they can return to Palestine. When I found them, it was the 4th generation growing up there. Palestine, according to them, was beautiful. And the women say, look, Dr. Swee, look at our embroidery. When you see the red, it is the setting sun in the desert. The blue is the beauty of the Mediterranean Sea. The orange is our orange growth. We have grown oranges for hundreds of years. They did not make the desert blue. We planted olives. We have roses. And that was Palestine. This was Gaza Hospital. A bomb came through and blew up the top 2 floors. A shell came through and demolished Dr. Habib's room. He was lucky he was outside when that happened. But we nevertheless have the lower floors, and we brought back our patients, a lot of them without legs, with old fractures and so on. We learned how to treat osteomyelitis. And outside in the refugee camps, the children came. Children without homes, without parents, living with extended family, but yet hopeful that for once there's a ceasefire, maybe the Israelis won't harass them anymore. This was Gaza Hospital, applying the plaster. I hope someday you people will learn some basic skills when you want to go to a war zone. Operating on osteomyelitis. I still do that today. Okay? And this went on for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of peace, which was broken suddenly when several hundred Israeli tanks drove up from South Lebanon, heading straight for Beirut city. They shelled their way across the southern half of Beirut, which you know is Muslim, and one detachment came straight and ringed Sabra and Shatila. And it shelled into the camp continuously. And from the top of Gaza Hospital, you can see a ring of smoke. You know the recent assault on Gaza, Netanyahu called it Operation Pillars of Cloud, or whatever it is, Pillars of Smoke. This is what happened when the tank shell a building, you send out one pillar of smoke. So if it shell continuously like that, it will be a ring of smoke. So Sabra and Shatila was completely sealed by tanks, and the shelling continued. We were in the hospital, and after about 12 hours, people began to be brought in. This time, not shelled. This time, shot at point blank. Because the able-bodied men have left. Now the camps were completely at mercy of whoever comes in, and they butchered and murdered. Then they came into my hospital. Many of them died even before we can operate on them. Some of them I know, like this old man who was telling me the story of Palestine as he was teaching me how to cook Arabic coffee, young babies, and even my own nurse. I want to introduce you to the concept of racism. On your left is a woman, Swedish nurse. Unfortunately, my photographic skills were pretty bad, so didn't see her face. She's blonde and blue eyes. On your right is a volunteer nurse from Bangladesh. He's a man and he's dark skinned. He was shot. She looked after him. And at nightfall, we ran out of blood, we ran out of food, and I've got to take down the last unit of blood from my mother to give it to a baby, both my patients, and she died. At night, the skies of Sabra and Shatila was flat. Military flares shot into the air by the Israeli army, and the massacre continued. After 3 days and 3 nights, we were ordered out of our basement operating theatre and lined up by a group of soldiers who took us out, saying that everybody with a foreign passport has to leave. And at that time, I was really concerned. There were 30 very, very ill patients in our ITU, and I thought they were going to murder them. Those that can run have already fled. We had 2,000 people in the hospital at one stage, so they all disappeared. At this time, 2 German medical students, okay? I want to mention this because I'm talking to medical students, insisted that they will not leave. They said our embassy will come for us, so we stayed with the patients. And it's because of them that all 30 patients survived. The rest of us were taken out along the main road of the camp. And while you're operating in the basement, hectic, you never think. But when you come out in the sunlight and you see the truth, if there was any doubt that the Palestinians were telling me the truth about them being refugees, this is it. Because on every dead body, there'll be an identity card saying that they're from Jaffa, from Haifa, from Tulkarem, from Gaza, various places in Palestine, some of which never exist anymore. So what the world refused to believe when they told them in their life, we will have to believe to their death. And the homes, the refugee homes, which they have refurbished, repainted, were once again destroyed. And if you look at this picture which I took, the walls were freshly painted, and in fact, the paint was not dry. yet the families taken out and killed. At one end of the refugee camp, you can see this. This was a mass grave. Underneath it was buried 1,000 bodies. The bodies were dumped there. Earth was covered on the bodies. Lime was poured, and the bodies dissolved. And we'll never know who they are, except they were the refugees of Shatila camp. Today you can visit that camp. My Palestinian friends call it Martyr Square, and every year some of us will go there and spend a week with the families and with their grandchildren. So that was my introduction to Palestine. Well, you got two choices. Either you quit, either you go for breakdown counseling, or you stay. So I decided I better stay. Against the advice of the American embassy, I didn't evacuate, went back, and these were the orphans I found everywhere, standing before the walls where their parents were butchered. Children without homes. And as I took this picture in October, the Lebanese winter was approaching. You can hear the thunder rumbling. And this was the last victim I treated, an 11-year-old boy brought in, shot with 27 members of his family. Munir was his name. He survived. We treated Munir and we transfused him, and I went to visit his grandmother. Of course, to you, I don't have to elaborate what a Muslim family is. You know that she's a Hajjah. She's a devout lady. She has been as a pilgrim to Mecca and all that. But to many other audiences I speak to, like in the States and so on, this is important because we need to know that she is a human being and just not some Muslim refugee. When I went there, my aim was to tell Hajjah that Munir will survive. You got your grandson. But then when I saw her, I didn't know what to say. So instead of me going babbling away, I just asked Hajjah, you want to say something? And Hajjah started in Arabic. And this was part of what she says. Some of it is in my book. I leave a copy with Nadia. It says, our doves are still here, our oranges give fragrance, and our sparrows sing their usual songs, yet Abu Zuhair is nowhere to be found. Beirut, you took all I had. You took my last hope in life, and my heart lies dead on your streets. Abu Zuhair, my fine young son, was cruelly cut off his roots on your soil. What else can I give to my country? Mother, says my children, come visit our grave. I go to your graves and tenderly embrace the stones. I ask the graves to make way so that you can breathe. I ask them to take care of you. I've entrusted you to them. How I envy those of you that were present when my children died. Did you let them die thirsty? Or were you merciful enough to give them a drink? Oh, crow of ill omen, who told you of my whereabouts? Bearers of coffin, will you not move slowly? Move slow so that I can see my loved ones once more. God, just give me 1 year, and then your will be done. I implore every passing bird to carry my love and anxiety to you, and to return with your news. But I know you are gone, your eyes mingled with the sand. Life, what life is left to us? Our hearts have died and our tears have dried for all the men and women who have died. God Almighty, give us patience. And my children, may my love always be a lantern to your path. And may God show you the holy way. Doctor, please go away. You open our wounds. We are so weary. There's nothing left to say. So that was Shatila camp. October 1982. I came up Hajar's house and walked in the main street of the camp, the one I showed you a picture of, and everywhere there was mass grave, women were crying, there was a stench of decaying body. Suddenly, this group of children found me. Oh, the Chinese doctor is back. So they surrounded me. One of them is my patient. And then as they were talking, I realized that many of them have lost their homes and their parents. But then suddenly, they lined themselves up and said, "Doctor, please take a picture of us. Take a picture of us so that you can show it to your friends all over the world. We are the children of Shatima." And as I began to focus and take the picture, they raised up their hands in a victory sign saying, "And we are not afraid. Let the Israelis come." Now this picture is very precious because in the foreground you got mass graves, dead bodies. In the background you got broken homes. But there were the children. The children who died soon afterwards as well. But the children whose spirit lives on forever and ever in my heart and in the hearts of people all over the world. Just now you talk about human beings, you talk about being a doctor. I think to become a doctor, or even to become a surgeon, you first have to be a human being. If you are not, then forget it. A surgeon is not only a technician. A consultant is not only a skilled person. One day, they will devise a robot to do all the operations. You will just feed in data and they give you the diagnosis and the treatment. But there's one thing which science and technical skills will never do. They will never give you a compassionate heart. The heart which God gave you. That human heart is unique. And that is why I've gone on for 30 years. Not because I'm consultant at Royal London or this and other. No, that's not important. But as a human being, I love the Palestinian people. I'm a witness to their suffering. And that's why I'm here. I'm not here to teach you surgery. If you want to read about surgery, I can recommend textbooks. So I began by talking to Israel. This is the Kahan Commission, which found the Prime Minister of Israel unfit for office. And that was a Holocaust museum. I think the circle is complete. Suffering is a universal thing. When a human being suffers, God suffers with them. And we remember, because if we forget, then we forget our humanity. And of course there was no peace in Middle East. Continued injustice ensures that there's no peace. Naively, somebody wrote this in a cement saying peace Lebanon 1982. Never peace. I came back, did a lot of speaking, and with some of my colleagues we started medical aid for Palestinians. And the moment we got registered, we got news that the refugee camps were attacked. Now this was crazy because I know over the last 2 years that the women have been rebuilding the homes, children have grown up, they've gone to school, they've picked up their lives, and once again they were attacked. This time, instead of allowing themselves to be butchered, they took up arms to defend themselves. My nurses of Gaza Hospital. And of course the British newspaper sensationalized it and called them human bombs, suicide bombers. And I was called up with television and so on, do you condone suicide bombing and so on. I said that if NATO went in to defend them and stop the massacre, then there's no need for them to kill themselves. There was no hospital to operate on because Gaza Hospital was burned, and that was operating in people's homes. Now, I know I'm talking to the wrong age group, but I still put this one in because it's important. The lady on your left was 80 years old, my oldest volunteer. She came from Germany. She She raised money, she bought an ambulance, and she wanted to join our medical team. And in the early days, Met sent out volunteers. Now we don't do that anymore. And Mama Rita came and said, I'll join you, Swee, take me on the team. I look at Mama, 80 years old, I don't know. Dr. Siva will tell me what's the life expectancy of an 80-year-old. You take her to a war zone. And if something happens, I don't know what's the regulation about bringing her body back to Germany, you see. So I looked at her, I said, Rita, she said, Swee, not like that, okay? I got ambulance. Oxfam is giving me the note. I'm a retired paramedic. I can do primary health care. I will drive the ambulance. I'll go to all the displaced people and give them milk every day, strengthen the children, check their teeth, give them health advice and so on. Very persuasive. I took Rita, and Rita worked for 2 years, going from refugee camp to refugee camp to look after the children. 1987 is the International Year of Shelter for the Homeless, declared by UN. This was Shatila camp, 1987. Some people are written off Western society just because they're Palestinian refugees. And when the rubble collapsed on the family, they got to come out and live in abandoned buildings. So, people who destroyed their tents, built up townships, have their towns destroyed, have become refugees again. How long for? So it was very depressing because it's gone on forever. And meanwhile, the rest of Middle East is blowing up. This was 2006, Operation Grapes of Wrath. Now that one you all seen on television, okay, where Lebanon was ruthlessly bombarded. And if you look at the coffins, the small ones were those of children. What have they done? And meanwhile, the map of Palestine has become totally mutilated. On your extreme left, that was Palestine, 1946. Green was Mandate Palestine. There were some areas of white, which is Zionist settlements. 1947, UN decided to partition Palestine without asking Palestinians, of course, into the Jewish area, which is all white, and the remaining a green area. 1948, Israel had its war of independence and took on even more land, and what's left was West Bank and Gaza. And in 1967, Israel conquered West Bank and Gaza, and that was the time when the whole Western world was rejoicing because Israel smashed the Arabs. And that was where I could remember the issue first. I was so happy I was in a church which celebrated because Israel has conquered 6 Arab and armies. And behind the headlines, the suffering and the pain to the people were never published. Otherwise, we don't have to tell you this story from it here. This was Gaza Strip, which I'm going to focus on now. And you can see that it's only the size of the Isle of Wight, 1.65 million people living under constant siege. Of course, now the news is a lot better. You can go into the internet and find out, just type in Gaza siege, and you'll know what it is all about. There's only 2 areas where people can enter. The north, Arabs, controlled by Israel, and the south, Rafah, which people like me go in from. But once you're inside Gaza, you can see how crowded it is. Fly an F-16 over, drop 3 or 4 bombs, and you can see that everybody becomes collateral damage. There's no such thing as precision bombardment. So, yet, I've met the bravest people in the whole world. What brought me to Gaza? 1987, there was an uprising, Palestinians versus Israeli occupation, and they were beaten down. And I went there to help them. Worked in a Christian hospital. and these are my Palestinian colleagues. Muslims and Christians work together. And that time, the press is not censored, so Israeli army beating Palestinians to death was displayed to the shock and horror of the whole world. So American pilgrims, which used to go to Israel to look at trees, Canada Park and so on, begin to realize that there's a story behind it, because there were 900 over Arab villages destroyed and bulldozed in order to plant those trees. Okay? Rubber bullets are not rubber. Gas canister are fired, and people get killed by rubber bullets. Blinded. Fractures. And then the Palestinian people begin to have a face. Faces of human beings, patient and long-suffering. Not angry terrorists as the press forced them to become. It's not at all. You know, look at this. You know, I spoke to a whole group of American Christian leaders. There are 38 of them. They tolerated the whole thing under this. Then I said, I want you to look at the faces of the Palestinian people. They are made in the image of God, and they are brothers and sisters, and they all walk down here. Beautiful Palestinian children, refugee camps which have been there for a long time, and yet a very beautiful Gaza. This was the Sea of Gaza, the beach, the sunset. I went back with Castellet in 2009, and a beautiful tree. But yet, when I took the picture of this in 1989, 343 Palestinians were shot by helicopter. It was May, it was the Eid, when everybody was coming out of the mosque, and the Israelis decided to fire at the crowd. Oranges, lemon, palm trees, gardens. So what have they done? So as though Gaza hasn't suffered enough, this was Castellet, 27th of December. They have chosen Christmas to launch Castellet. That you remember. Okay? So when I returned, Gaza became desolate and obliterated. This was Gaza. One and a half thousand people were killed in 3 weeks. On the first day, 250 people were killed. This was the mortuary of Shifa Hospital. The children, burnt bodies. Bodies who can't be found. Whole families with amputations. A lot of money was spent on weapon research. We have no time to talk about this. The Hospital of Gaza, the Shifa Hospital, reminds me of the Royal London when we operated on the July bomb victims. Phosphorus shells being used. But what you can't see, you can see the wounds, they're dramatic. What you cannot see is the siege since 2006. Gaza is living on 70% of what the calorie it should have. Chronic siege, chronic denial of medicine and food. So that was also blown up. This was phosphorus. It's very modern, you see, because white phosphorus is very volatile. At 32 degrees, it ignites and becomes phosphoric acid. But not the Israeli army's version of phosphorus. It's stabilized with resin, so it lies dormant until you touch it. Then it ignites and blows up. So children are usually the victim because they go and pick it up. Fuel air explosive, demolishing a whole home. Is it new? No. 1982, 11-story building buried 200 people, and yet it was not banned. Cluster bombs, assassination. ambulances which are rocketed, health workers killed, UN compound. All this you know because it is during your conscious period, okay? Deliberately bombing and burning food stocks, hospitals, schools, 400 schools are destroyed, and impose a restriction on rebuilding. Much of Gaza is still not rebuilt. People were living in tents. So what to do then? I asked these two women, so what to do? This was their home. And I was told, you are talking to Palestinians. We don't only build, but we also rebuild. So we are a nation of rebuilders. So these are the lessons I learned. And I want to show you this again because I want to explain why I'm here. When I came out of this, I just said to myself, God forgive me for 33 years I've been supporting Israel. I've been prejudiced. I've been bigoted. I think I was very good. I got pride. And it's no good blaming Israel, blaming USA. But within my own heart, I've got to blame myself. So forgive me and give me a chance to support the Palestinians. And be it your will that they will accept my friendship. And that's why I'm here. And also to remember the children. And today I add to you the children of Gaza, whom, if you know anything about art therapy or painting, this picture tells a lot because the tanks are coming to their homes. They are trying to resist the tanks by burning tires. They are throwing stones and they're being shot. And then there's helicopters in the air and they're trying to rescue people. So these are what the children are painting. And yet, the same children will make beautiful objects. Some of them are orphans. Beautiful objects out of the color of Palestine. And that day when I went there, they gave me a little present, which I keep so precious. And hopefully, the flowers of Palestine will blossom. And hopefully, we will learn God's way and not our own way.